Thank you very much, Matt. And I want to offer my best wishes to all here at the Heritage Foundation as it embarks on what is really an exciting new era. I also want to make clear that I spent much of the first year that I served in the United States Senate joking, or perhaps half joking, that Jim DeMint should run for president. This isn't exactly what I had in mind. Perhaps he misunderstood me. The thing that makes Jim DeMint a great leader is the same thing that has always made people like Matt Spaulding and the Heritage Foundation itself so very valuable. That is your shared insistence on making the positive case for conservatism, what conservatives are for. In Washington, it's common for both parties to succumb to easy negativity. Republicans and Democrats stand opposed to each other, obviously, and outspoken partisanship is what almost always gets the most headlines. This negativity is unappealing on both sides, and that helps explain why the federal government is increasingly held in such low regard by the American people. But for the left, the defensive crouch at least makes sense. Liberalism's main purpose today is to defend its past gains from conservative reform. But negativity on the right, to my mind, makes no sense at all. The left has created this false narrative that liberals are for things, and conservatives are against things. When we concede this narrative, even just implicitly, we concede the debate before that debate even begins. And yet too many of us, elected conservatives especially, do it anyway. We take the bait. A liberal proposes an idea, we explain why it won't work, and we think that we've won the debate at that moment. But even if we do, we reinforce that false narrative that I'm talking about, winning battles while we're losing the war at every step. This must be frustrating to the scholars of the Heritage Foundation, who work every day producing new ideas about what conservatives can be for. But it should be even more frustrating to the conservatives around the country that we, as elected conservatives, were in fact elected to serve. After all, they know what they're for, so why don't we? Perhaps it's because it's so easy in Washington to forget. In Washington, we debate public policy so persistently that we can lose sight of the fact that policies are means, and they're not ends. We say that we're for lower taxes or less regulation or for spending restraint. But those are just policies we advocate. They're not what we're really for. What we're really for are the good things that those policies will yield to the American people. What we're really for is the kind of society that those policies would allow the American people to create together. Together. If there's one idea too often missing from our public debate, it's that idea, together. In the last few years, we conservatives seem to have abandoned words like together, compassion, and community, as if their only possible meanings were as some sort of a secret code for statism. This is a mistake. Collective action doesn't only, or even usually, mean government action. Conservatives cannot surrender the idea of community to the left when it is the vitality of our communities upon which our entire philosophy ultimately depends. Nor can we allow one politician's occasional conflation of compassion and bigger government to discourage us from emphasizing the moral code of our worldview. Conservatism ultimately is not about the bills we want to pass. It is about the kind of nation we want to be. If conservatives want the American people to support our agenda for the government, we have to do a better job showing them our vision for society and reconnecting our agenda to it, to that vision. We need to remind the American people, and perhaps, too, the Republican Party itself, that the true and proper end of political subsidiarity is social solidarity. Ours has never been a vision of isolated, atomized loners. It is instead a vision of husbands and wives, parents and children, neighbors and neighborhoods, volunteers and congregations, bosses and employees, businesses and customers, clubs, teams, groups, associations, and friends. The essence of human freedom, of civilization itself, is cooperation. This is something conservatives should celebrate. It's what conservatism is all about. Freedom doesn't mean you're on your own. It means we're all in this together. Our vision of American freedom is of two separate but mutually reinforcing institutions: a free enterprise economy and voluntary civil society. History has shown both of these organic systems to be extremely efficient at delivering goods and services. But these two systems are not good because they work. They work because they are good. Together they work for everyone because they impel everyone to work together. They harness individuals' self-interest to the common good for the rest of the community and ultimately the nation. They work because in a free market economy and voluntary civil society, whatever your career or your cause, your success depends on your service. The only way to look out for yourself is to look out for those around you. The only way to get ahead is to help other people do the same. What exactly are all those supposedly cutthroat, exploitive businessmen and women competing for? Well, to figure out the best way to help the most people. That's what the free market does. It rewards people for putting their God-given talents and their own exertions out in the service of their neighbors. Whatever money they earn is the wealth they create, value that they add to other people's lives. No matter who you are or what you're after, the first question anyone in a free market must ask him or herself is, how can I help? What problems need to be solved? What can I do to improve other people's lives? The free market does not allow anyone to take. It impels everyone to give. The same process works in our voluntary civil society. Conservatives' commitment to civil society begins, of course, with the family and the paramount, indispensable institution of marriage. But it doesn't end there. Just as individuals depend on free enterprise to protect them from economic oppression, families depend on mediating institutions to protect them from social isolation. That is where the social entrepreneurs of our civil society come in. Just like for-profit businesses, nonprofit, religious, civic, cultural, and charitable institutions also succeed only to the extent that they serve the needs of the community around them. Forced to compete for voluntary donations, the most successful mediating institutions in a free civil society are at least as innovative and efficient as profitable companies. If someone wants to make the world a better place, a free civil society requires that he or she do it well. Social entrepreneurs know that only the best soup kitchens and the best community theater companies and the best youth soccer leagues, and for that matter, the very best conservative think tanks will survive. So they serve. They serve their donors by spending their resources wisely. They serve their communities by making them better places to live. And they serve their beneficiaries by meeting needs together better than they can meet them acting alone. Freedom doesn't divide us. Big government does. It's big government, after all, that turns citizens into supplicants, capitalists into cronies, and cooperative communities into competing special interests. Freedom, by contrast, unites us. It pulls us together, and it aligns our interests. It draws us out of ourselves and into the lives of our friends, neighbors, and even perfect strangers. It draws us upward toward the best vision of ourselves. The free market and civil society are not things more Americans need protection from. They're things more Americans need access to. Liberals scoff at all of this. They attack free enterprise as a failed theory that privileges the rich, exploits the poor, and threatens the middle class. But our own history proves exactly the opposite. Free enterprise is the only economic system that does not privilege the rich. Instead, it incentivizes them to put their wealth to productive use serving other people, or eventually lose it all. Free enterprise is the greatest weapon against poverty ever conceived by man. Let me ask, if If the free market exploits the poor, how do liberals explain how the richest nation in human history and its citizens descended mostly from immigrants who originally came here with nothing? Nor does free enterprise threaten the middle class. Free enterprise is what created the middle class in the first place. The free market created the wealth that liberated millions of American families from subsistence farming, opening up opportunities for the pursuit of happiness never known before or since in government-directed economies. Progressives are equally dismissive of our voluntary civil society. They simply do not trust free individuals and organic communities to look out for each other or solve problems without supervision. They think only government, only they, possess the moral enlightenment necessary to do that. To be blunt, elite progressives in Washington don't really believe in communities at all. No, they believe in community organizers. Self-anointed strangers, preferably ones with Ivy League degrees, fashionable ideological grievances, and a political agenda to redress those grievances. For progressives, believe the only valid purpose of community is to accomplish the agenda of the state. But we know from our own lives that the true purpose of our communities is instead to accomplish everything else. To enliven our days, to ennoble our children, to strengthen our families, to unite our neighborhoods, to pursue our happiness and protect our freedom to do so. This vision of America, conservatives seek, is not an Ayn Rand novel. No, it's a Norman Rockwell painting or a Frank Capra movie. A society of plain, ordinary kindness and a little looking out for the other fellow, too. The great obstacle to realizing this vision today is government dysfunction. This is where our vision must inform our agenda. What reforms will make it easier for entrepreneurs to start new businesses, for young couples to get married and start new families, and for individuals everywhere to come together to bring to life flourishing new partnerships and communities? What should government do? And just as important, what should government not do to allow the free market to create new economic opportunity and to allow civil society to create new social capital? We conservatives are not against government. The free market and civil society depend on a just, transparent, and accountable government to enforce the rule of law. What we're against are two pervasive problems that grow on government like mold on otherwise perfectly good bread: corruption and inefficiency. It is important to note that government corruption and inefficiency are what stand today between the American people and the economy and society that they deserve. To combat those pathologies, a new conservative reform agenda should center around three basic principles: equality, diversity, and sustainability. Let me explain. The first and most important of these principles is equality. The only way for the free market and civil society to function, to tie personal success to interpersonal service, to align the interests of the strong and those of the weak, is to have everyone play by the same set of rules. Defying this principle is how our government has always corrupted itself, our free market, and our civil society. In the past, the problem was political discrimination that held the disconnected down. Today, government specialty is dispensing political privileges to prop the well-connected up. In either case, the corruption is the same: official inequality, twisting the law to deem some people more equal than others, making it harder for some to succeed even when they serve, and harder for others to fail even when they don't. And so we have corporate welfare, big businesses receiving direct and indirect subsidies that smaller companies don't receive. We have uncivil society, politicians funding large, well-connected nonprofit institutions based on political favoritism rather than merit. We have venture socialism, politicians funneling taxpayer money to politically correct businesses that cannot attract real investors. We have regulatory capture, industry leaders influencing the rules governing their sectors to protect their interests and hamstringing innovative challengers. The first step in a true conservative reform agenda must be to end this kind of preferential policymaking. Beyond simply being the right thing to do, it's a prerequisite for earning the moral authority and the political credibility necessary to do anything else. Why should the American people trust our ideas about middle-class entitlements when we're still propping up big banks? Why should they trust us to fix the tax code when we use their tax dollars to create artificial markets for uncompetitive industries? Why should they trust our vision of a free civil society when we give special privileges to supposed nonprofits like Planned Parenthood, public broadcasting, agricultural checkoff programs, and the Export-Import Bank? And perhaps most important, why should Americans trust us at all when too often we don't really trust them? When we vote for major legislation negotiated in secret, without debating it, and without even reading it, deliberately excluding the American people from their own government. To conservatives, equality needs to mean equality for everyone. The second principle to guide our agenda is diversity, or, as you might have heard it called elsewhere, federalism. The biggest reason the federal government makes too many mistakes is that it makes too many decisions. Most of these are decisions the federal government doesn't have to make, and therefore shouldn't. Every state in the Union has a functioning constitutional government. And just as important, each state has a unique political and cultural history with unique traditions, values, and priorities. Progressives today are fundamentally intolerant of this kind of diversity. They insist on imposing their values on everyone. To them, the 50 states are just another so-called community to be organized, brought to heel by their betters in Washington, D.C. This flies in the face of the founders and of the Constitution, of course, but it also flies in the face of common sense and experience. The usurpation of state authority is why our national politics has become so dysfunctional and so intolerably rancorous. We expect one institution, the federal government, to set policies that govern the lives of 300 million people spread across an entire continent. Of course, it's going to get it right most of the time. That's why successful organizations in the free market and civil society are moving in the opposite direction. While government consolidates, businesses delegate and decentralize. While Washington insists that it knows everything, effective organizations increasingly rely on diffuse social networks and customizable problem solving. We should not be surprised at all that Washington has assumed greater control over transportation, education, labor, welfare, healthcare, banking, and so much else. All of those increasingly centralized systems are failing at exactly the same time. Conservatives should seize this opportunity, not to impose our ideas on these systems, but to crowdsource the solutions to the states. Let the unique perspectives and values of each state craft its own policies and see what works and see what doesn't work. If Vermont's pursuit of happiness leads it and its people to want more government, and Utah's less, then who are politicians from the other 48 states to tell them they can't have it? Would we tolerate this kind of official intolerance in any other part of American life? A Pew study just last week found that Americans trust their state governments twice as much as the federal government, and their local governments even more. This shouldn't be a surprise. It should be a hint. State and local governments are more responsive, representative, and accountable than Washington, D.C. It's time to make them more powerful as well. In the past, conservatives, given federal power, have been tempted to overuse it. We must resist that temptation. If we want to be a diverse movement, we must be a tolerant movement. The price of allowing conservative states to be conservative is allowing liberal states to be liberal. Call it subsidiarity, call it federalism, call it constitutionalism. But we must make this fundamental principle of pluralistic diversity a pillar of our agenda. And that brings us to our third guiding principle. Once we eliminate policy privilege and restore political and policy diversity, we can start ensuring policy sustainability. Once the federal government stops doing the things that it shouldn't, it can start doing the things it should better. That means national defense and intelligence, federal law enforcement and the courts, immigration, intellectual property, and even the senior entitlement programs whose fiscal outlook threatens our future solvency and very survival. Once we clear unessential policies from the books, federal politicians will no longer be able to hide from the public or from their constitutional responsibilities and limitations. Congress will be forced to work together to reform the problems government has created in our healthcare system. We can fundamentally reform and modernize our regulatory system. We'll be forced to rescue our senior entitlement programs from bankruptcy. And we can reform our tax system to eliminate the corporate code's bias in favor of big businesses over small businesses, and the individual code's bias against saving, investing, and especially against our parents, our ultimate investor class. That is how we turn the federal government's unsustainable liabilities into sustainable assets. The bottom line of all of this is that controversies in that building over there, the really big white one with the dome, need to start doing what conservatives in this building already do. Think long and hard about what we believe, why we believe it, and most of all, remember to put first things first. For conservatives, the first thing is not our agenda of political subsidiarity. It's our vision of social solidarity. It is a vision of society as an interwoven and interdependent network of individuals, families, communities, businesses, churches, formal and informal groups working together to meet each other's needs and enrich each other's lives. It is of a free market economy that grants everyone a fair chance and an unfettered start in the race of life. It is of a voluntary civil society that strengthens our communities, protects the vulnerable, and minds the gaps to make sure no one gets left behind. And it is of a just, tolerant, and sustainable federal government that protects and complements free enterprise and civil society, rather than presuming to replace them. This vision will not realize itself. The left, the inertia of the status quo, and the entire economy of this city stand arrayed against it. Realizing it will sometimes require conservatives to take on entrenched interests, pet policies, and political third rails. Many of these will be interests traditionally aligned with and financially generous to the establishments within both political parties. And sometimes it'll require us to stand up for those that no one else will. The unborn child in the womb, the poor student in the failing school, the reformed father languishing in prison, the single mom trapped in poverty, and the splintering neighborhoods that desperately need all of them. But if we believe this vision is worth the American people being for, it's worth elected conservatives fighting for. What we're fighting for is not just individual freedom, but the strong, vibrant communities that free individuals form. The freedom to earn a good living and build a good life. That is what conservatives are for. Thank you very much, and may God bless America.